Hello and welcome to the third part of SCSS, Writing Better CSS. Today we are going to be looking at mixins and inheritance. Mixins are a very useful part of SCSS. They allow us to define reusable styles. So for example, this scenario here, I've got a button and I want every button on my imaginary site to have these styling. But then I want other buttons to take after this but also build upon their styling so they can have their own properties. So the easiest way to do this would be just to copy and paste. And you can imagine if I had another few buttons and I was copying and paste this lots and lots, it would get a bit messy, especially if I was in different files using buttons, then it would be all over the place. If I wanted to change this padding here, for example, I would have to go through every occurrence of padding and change it. Luckily, we can use mixins to do something a lot easier. So let's go into the variables folder. We're going to define a mixin. And the way we define a mixin is by first writing mixin and then the mixin name. So this can be anything. So reusable button. And that's it. We simply write our styles in here. So I'll come and copy and paste this into here. I'll save that. And I'll get rid of that one because we don't need it anymore. And we'll import the file like we learned in the last part. And save that. And now to use that style over and over again, we simply include and then the name reusable button. And then if I save that, and we'll come into the index CSS and we'll have a look. So I've got another button. It takes after this like so. Another very useful thing we can do with mixins is define selectors inside of the mixin. So let's just say on all of our buttons, when we hovered over the button, we wanted the button's background to go to blue. So we could write this inside of the mixin, like so. So hover, and then background color of blue. So now on every single time we include this reusable button, it also includes the hover. So we can have a look at that again. So you can see another button hover, like so. So this is obviously very useful when writing lots of CSS, because imagine if we had this over and over again. We're changing this to one single line. It just keeps the file size down and makes it a lot more readable. And obviously we can also use selectors. So we could have, imagine our buttons have paragraphs inside of them. We can then style the paragraph like so. So we can use it just as like normal CSS. Another really cool thing we can do with mixins is define arguments by writing parentheses before the curly brackets and after the name. And inside of that, we can take a variable, and this variable can be anything. So let's just have a color, and we want don't save that yet. So let's imagine that on all of our buttons, we wanted there to be a border of 1px solid, and then a color that could be anything that we can define. So we can just reuse that variable here, like so. If I save that, I'll get an error here saying on the other file I haven't specified the value. So the way we use them when they have an argument, when we are including, we also need to pass in the color that we want, or the variable value that we want, depending on what you're using. So I'm just going to pass in blue, like so. So I save that now, save that, and I'll come into here, and you'll see, there we go, border 1px solid blue. So it allows us to reuse different styles as well. We can also have a default value for this, so again, if we got rid of that, and if we save, it gives us an error. But if we come into here and we add a colon followed by a color that we want to be default, so we want it to be default red, and we save that, and then come back inside here, you'll see that it becomes red. So we don't need to pass it in if we have a default value. It's just a nice little way to make it safe when you're using these, so you don't get errors thrown like that, just in case somewhere along the line you forget to use the color. Another thing we can do with the variables is use it to specify what kind of element we want to target using selectors. So let's imagine that we had a HTML file and it consisted of lots of different lists, and we had lots of different HTML files that also consisted of lots of different lists. And we wanted the list to be able to have a paragraph, a H1, an anchor tag inside of it, any text element. And we don't know what that might be. For example, the home page could have a paragraph in it, another page could have an anchor tag in it. And we want to have all the text elements inside of the list be the exact same styling. So I could obviously do something like this. I could just say H1, H2, H3, paragraph, anchor, and then give some style in there. But every time we reuse this mixin, we'd be creating unnecessary code, because we might use this mixin on a list that only has a paragraph, but we're also adding to that list styling for a H1 and a H2 and a H3 and an anchor. So to make things a lot more versatile, we can pass in the element that we want to use in here. So let's get rid of this, and we'll rename the variable to just element. And the way we'll use this element is like so. So we'll include the reusable button, and let's just add the parentheses. And let's say this list, just pretend it's a list, is going to be a P. I want to target the P in this list. And then I can come into the mixin. I start with a hash, and then in the side of curly braces, we put the variable name, so element. And then we can give that a certain style. So let's just say color of red, like that. And then I'll come and save this as well, like so. And if we come in and look here now, we have another button, and then another button P with a color of red. And let's change that to a H1. Save it again, come in, and it changes it to a H1. So it allows us to use different styles and different elements. So we can specify using this that we want it to be a placeholder for an element. Because we couldn't obviously just write element like so, that wouldn't work. We have to write it inside like that. Moving on from mixins, we have something that's called extend, and it allows us to do what's called inheritance. So let's go into our index file, and I'll get rid of this for now. And let's say that we have a button on our site, and we want all the buttons on our site to have a background of blue. And then I have another class that is an error button. And I want the error button to take over this, so I want it to have a background color of blue, but I also want it to have a border of 5 pixels red. So obviously it's an error button. So obviously again, I could copy and paste it. I could use a mixin, or I could extend it. And the way we extend it is simply at extend followed by the class name. So button. I think we'll change that to dot button, and then that there has to be a class like so. So now that extends it. If I save that and I come into here, the error button has a border. The error buttons appear. It has a border, and then it has a background color of blue. Now this may seem really good and useful because we don't need to use mixins and all the jargon and syntax that goes along with them. We can simply just extend it. But you've got to be very careful when using extend, and I'll showcase why right now. Let's say we have 3 classes. No space there. So we've got class 1, class 2, and class 3. And we'll rename the numbers. And let's say this one has a color of red. This one a color of blue, and then this one just a random border, doesn't matter. And let's say I wanted to extend the third one. Okay, I'll change this to a background color. Now I want the third one to extend 1 and 2. So I'll do at extend class 1, and then at extend class 2. Like so. And then I'll save that, and you'll see the problem. So I get 3 different classes. So I get class 3 in class 1, I get class 3 in class 2, and I get class 3. But if I just use mixins here, it would have just put the background color in here and the color in here. It creates a lot more. Yeah, if you look at different examples, if you had lots of different code and extended it, it just gets really hard to understand what's going on. And it can create a lot of unwanted code, which will bog down your speed of the site. So I would recommend sticking with mixins, but you can use these for smaller examples like this, because obviously this wouldn't be that harmful, but if you're using extends everywhere instead of mixins, it can be quite damaging. And that's it for the third part. Thank you for watching.